died of dehydration. Of that, only 319 men survived, and so I have you before you, basically our legacy. This is our legacy in the United States Navy. This is our nation's legacy. This is basically, he's basically a national treasure. So I want you to introduce you to Mr. Buckett right here.
Can you hear me all right? First of all, I'd like to thank Commander Cow for having me here today and taking us on a wonderful tour of the facility and giving us a great lunch. I have my family sitting in the front row. This is my daughter right here. This is my daughter-in-law, Evie. Bill's wife, Con, and Anya, and a new little guy that just came into town named Rye, Trevor, Dottie, my wife, for 67 years, and Bill. And thank you very much. I'd like to tell you a little story about the Indy as much as I can, and some of the things that happened along the way. First of all, I am a survivor. The Indianapolis was sunk in 1945 on July 30th, just 15 days before the end of the war. 880 men were killed, 317 were saved, and it was the worst casualty in the naval history. It shouldn't happen, but it did. But anyway, let me tell you a little bit about the ship. The Indianapolis, was built in the Navy shipyard in Philadelphia, and it was commissioned in 1932. It right away became the ship of state for President Roosevelt and his Secretary of State, and sometimes the Secretary of the Navy. And they used to go on different trips to Hawaii, South America, and different countries on peace missions. On that ship, President Roosevelt had his own stateroom. He had his own furniture on the ship. And they even built him a temporary elevator so that he could get up and down. When the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, the Indianapolis was on Johnson Island on a simulated bombing expedition. And so right away that they knew that the Japanese had attacked Pearl Harbor, President Roosevelt's furniture went overboard. His bed, his furniture, everything went into the drink. And his elevator was taken down. And the ship went right on its way to try to join our Navy to try and find the Japanese fleet. Let me tell you a little bit how I got into the Navy. I was working in New York City. I had graduated from high school, went back for a postgraduate course just to play football. And after I finished playing football, I decided I wanted to go into the Navy. So I went down to New York City and I enlisted in the Navy. And that was on September 5th, 1942. And right away, they sent me to the Great Lakes, and I was there for about 5-6 weeks. And they put us on a train, and they shipped us across to Treasure Island in California, and we stayed there for a few days. Then we were put on a troop ship, and we went across to Hawaii. And we got to Hawaii, and they put us loading ammunition in the ammunition depot. And that was rough duty because the mosquitoes were fierce. They always talk about Texas having the biggest things of anything. Well, I think the mosquitoes in that section of Hawaii were just as big. One day we were riding along, and there were 3 horses in the field, and there was a swarm of mosquitoes over the top of them. Well, we didn't think anything of it, and we came back after we were loading ammunition all day long, and the horses were gone, completely disappeared, and the mosquitoes were pitching horseshoes. Well, at any rate, they decided to take us down to Pearl Harbor, and we got down there, and there was 2 huge cruisers sitting there at the dock. One was the Nashville, and one was the Indianapolis. And they sort of went alphabetical, and my name being Buckett, I got onto the Indianapolis, which was fantastic. So I went aboard an apprentice seaman on this huge ship. If you can imagine this ship was 2 football fields long. Actually, it was 6 feet longer than the battleship Arizona. And where did they put me on the ship? I got assigned to the mess quarters for the chiefs, making donuts. So anyway, I was in the mess hall there for quite some time, and one of the chiefs came up to me one day and said, "Would you like to be a quartermaster striker?" And I said, "Oh, that would be wonderful." So from that day on, I left the mess hall, and I went up, and used to stand watches as quartermaster striker on the bridge, and I was either working the engine order telegraph, which was the speed of the ship, or I was qualified helmsman. So I did that for quite some time. And then one day an officer came out. He said to me, "Can you type?" And I said, "Yes, sir, I can." He says, "Well, we need a yeoman to do the Navy log and the war diary." And I says, "Well, I can do that." He says, "Well, you have the job." So from that day on, I was transferred from a quartermaster division, so I became a yeoman. And I had to use it, do the Navy log every day and the war diary. Well, I did that for some time, and in fact, I did it the rest of the time that I was on the ship. And then the ship decided to go up and go up to the Aleutians. Well, I mean to tell you, that was rough duty, because up there, everything had to be battened down. The waves were anywhere between 30 and 40 feet high, and we had 2 destroyers with us, and most of the time you couldn't even see them because we were up on the top and they were down on the bottom. Well, one day, one of the men fell off one of the destroyers, and you can't be in that water too long or you're frozen to death. He was in the water for anywhere between 14 to 15 minutes, and we pulled him out of the water, covered him with blankets, poured brandy down him, and saved his life. He later went back onto his ship, and there was one man we saved. We were up there mainly to bombard Attu and Kiska, which was the Japanese had taken, and we wanted to get them back. And we did a great job on that. We bombarded the islands day after day. And then one night, while we were just sitting out there in the bay, we had a ship fire on us. And we couldn't imagine what that was. But they got our guns ready. The 5-inch guns fired a salvo and hit that ship, almost the first salvo that we aimed at them. And it was an ammunition ship. Japanese ammunition ship, and she started to blow up. She was on fire, and she sunk within a short period of time. There was no survivors. And we later found out that it was an ammunition ship because we picked up some debris. Well, everything up there in the Aleutian Islands had to be battened down because you couldn't leave anything loose because it would come along and hit you or knock you down. Everything in the mess hall had to be secured. If you wanted a cup of coffee, there was a Joe pot that used to swing up along the top there, and if you were lucky enough to catch it, you could have a cup of coffee. Well, I'll tell you, after we were up there for a certain amount of time, we were up there months, and we were running out of food. And I think the last week that we were up there, I almost lived on ice cream. And I think, I don't know if you guys know about the Geedunk stand at all, where the ice cream comes from. That's what we used to call our ice cream stand, the Geedunk. And I lived on ice cream for a long time because the food was really bad. At any rate, we were lucky enough to, after we had secured Attu and Kiska, we had taken the islands back from the Japanese. We were sent down to Mare Island to have a few repairs, and then we were sent to the South Pacific. Well, in the South Pacific, almost all of the islands along down in there were taken over by the Japanese. And we first started with Tarawa. Well, we bombarded Tarawa day in and day out, and we thought we had done a good job. But the Japanese had dug down further than we expected, and all the Marines and the landing forces that went in were not very good because they were killed. And it was a sad sight to see. But from that Tarawa, we learned that we had to use armored piercing shells, and that would go a little deeper and catch the Japanese further down below. At any rate, we finally did secure Tarawa, and I was lucky enough to even be able to go over on the island, and it was a very sorrowful sight to see because there were mounds and mounds of people who were Marines, Army perhaps, all piled up, and it was just awful. But anyway, we left Tarawa after securing that, and we worked our way down into Guam, Tinian, Saipan, and Iwo Jima. And actually, all of these islands were taken by the Japanese, and all these islands we wanted to get back. And we did, and we finally got all these islands back. But when we were down in Iwo Jima, we had just secured from GQ, and a low-flying suicide plane came in, and our 40 millimeter and 20 millimeter guns opened up on fire, and it hit the plane. But the pilot swerved the plane and went into our afterdeck, and the plane crashed on top of the deck, but the bomb went through the mess hall, a berthing compartment, and right out to the bottom of the ship, and exploded and blew 2 holes in the bottom of the ship. And of course it completely ruined our propeller, did damage to our distilling water, and some other things that we had that were very essential. It killed 9 men, wounded 21 men, and it was just terrible. So I don't know if we were sitting ducks now in the bay, and planes would come over day after day. And we finally, in our recollection, shot down 6 Japanese planes while we were stuck in that water there, sitting, waiting. And we had, I don't know whether it was Navy divers, but there was divers that went down and repaired the bottom of our ship just so that we could get away and get back to Mare Island. And they did that within a couple of days, and we limped back to Mare Island, and thank goodness we made it back. So we were there for repairs for quite some time, and they had given us leave, and we were able to go home. And we got back. We no sooner got back than just a couple of days before we got back, there was a couple of crates put on our ship. And of course, nobody knew what it was. It was top secret. And the Marines would guard it day and night. And even the captain had no idea what was on the ship. So he was given orders to take off at high speed to Tinian. And he said his ship wasn't ready yet. And they said, well, you'll have to take some of the civilian workers with you to help you while you're on your way. And we did. And we started out. Now, Tinian was 500 miles away, and we made it in 10 days. Now, that's moving for a warship. And at times, this ship is capable of doing 32 knots. But she never did that much, but she is capable of it. And so we got to Tinian, and we unloaded our cargo, and our cargo happened to be the components of the atomic bomb. And they put that onto the Enola Gay, and of course the Enola Gay took it and dropped it on Hiroshima. And at that time, we were on our way to Guam, and we were in there to get orders because we had to go to Leyte to pick up an admiral in Leyte and his crew. They told us in Guam there's no submarines in the area. You don't need an escort. You can go by yourself, which was a wrong thing to do because there was 2 submarines in the area. And at any rate, we were about halfway to Leyte, and it was midnight, and all of a sudden there was an explosion, and the first torpedo took the whole forward part of the ship right off, and of course the ship was doing about 15 knots at the time, and that water just kept coming in. It didn't stop it at all, and then another hit us in the midships, around the magazine section, and that blew up. We were in sad shape. That ship, for a big ship, sunk in 12 minutes. At any rate, I used to sleep in the catapult tower, which is midships, and I used to sleep on top of a desk. I put a mattress on top of the desk, and that's where I would sleep. It knocked me off the desk. I didn't know what it was. I thought, oh, we must have hit a mine because there's not supposed to be any submarines in the area. I got fully dressed, everything, shoes, socks, everything, the whole works, and went down to the quarterdeck. But before I went down, I stopped off at another office in the catapult tower where my buddy was. His name was Ed Alvey, and I had just been best man at his wedding in San Francisco. The day before we left. Well, I couldn't find him anywhere. I didn't know where he was, and I couldn't find him, so I just went down to the quarterdeck. And on the quarterdeck, Commander Lipsky was there, and Commander Lipsky was burned very badly. And he said, men, he said, do you have life jackets? And some of them said no, and he says, well, we have some here. He said, he asked me, he said, would you pass some of them out to some of the men? And I said, yes, I would. So I passed them out as many as I could, and then he said to me, he said, you better go up and get your own life jacket. And I said, okay. So I went back up to my office, and I had a different type of a life jacket. Being that I worked in an office, I had one of these rubber tubes that you just blew up and wrapped around you or just laid across. So I got that, came back down. I no sooner got back down and Commander Lipsky said, we're going to have to get off, we're going to have to abandon ship. The ship had already rolled over on its side, and all I did was walk off the ship. I just walked right off the side into the water. And I knew that the suction of a ship can pull you down. So I swam 50 to 60 yards out as fast as I could. I got out there, and one of the men said to me, "Do you have a life jacket?" And I said, "No, yes, I do." I said, "But I don't have it blown up." And he says, "Well, hold on to me." He says, "And you blow it up and you'll be okay," which I did. But before I had talked to him, a huge wave. The ship was standing straight up. The propellers were still rolling around. And it went down, and a huge wave covered us with diesel oil. And a lot of us swallowed the diesel oil, which was horrible. And for that whole first night, we had dry heaves trying to get rid of the diesel oil, which was nothing that was going to come back up. At any rate, that man, whoever he was, sort of saved my life, and I don't even know his name. I was in the biggest group of swimmers, and it was better that you stayed close and in a tight-knit group. Anybody that seemed to leave that certain group, the sharks would get, and they came in thousands. They were all over. The water was very clear. You could see them swimming below you. I had one shark swim through my legs. Oh, I'm so glad he didn't like me. At any rate, I know it's a fun thing to laugh at, but it isn't when you hear men yelling and screaming, being taken down by sharks, and there's nothing you can do, and there's hardly anything you can do but just stay close to each other and try to pray and pray that it isn't you that's going to be taken by a shark. And days went on, and you know, your first day you say, "Oh, they know we're coming. They know we're coming because the admiral is going to be waiting for his flagship." We were supposed to have target practice a couple of days out. We got a message off, and we did. They did receive a message, but they paid no attention to it. They thought it was a false message. So here we are, all these things happen to us, and we're sitting out in that ocean, and nobody knows where we are or cares about us. Oh, the days started to go by. The hunger disappeared. After a while, hunger didn't mean anything. Thirst was the thing that got you. You couldn't get rid of being thirsty. And some men now, second or third day, started to drink the salt water. And my God, that salt water is just full of chemicals. And it's the worst thing in the world that you can do, because your tongues blow up, you hallucinate, you go crazy. It's horrible to see some of these things that happen. And some of the men would say, "Oh, come with me. We have a house over on this island. My uncle has a place over there. There's a lot of girls over there. And there's a whole bunch of, they got liquor and booze and everything else." He says, "Come with me." That's the last time we saw him. He took off, and he was off by himself. That was it. It's terrible. I had a buddy, the second or third day, he was right with me. His name was Marion Dry. No, Marion, I forget his last name now. But anyway, he couldn't swim. Every time the water came up around his lips, he would shiver. And I would say, "Marion, be careful. Don't do that. I'll take care of you. Just relax and take it easy." Well, you know what happens at night? You're close by with somebody, and also night comes, and all of a sudden, you don't know where your friend went. I never did find Marion again. I lost him that night. a very good friend. It's something awful because as time goes by, even on the third day, I can remember I went temporarily blind from the sun and the salt water, and I couldn't see. And it was bad. Everything that happened to us was bad. I had my life jacket, which it was just a tube, and I just laid across it. It was starting to lose air, so I decided I was going to blow it up again. Well, I started to open the valves, and all the skin came off my hand. I couldn't even open the valve with my fingers, so I had to open it with my teeth, and I blew it up, and then I used it from then on. But everything like that, just little things like that happen. But they are terrible things. And at night, you have no hope at all because nobody's going to find you at night. Not only that, the sun is so hot during the day, and then at night it gets so cool, you're shivering all night long. You can't wait for the day to come again. And not only that, because then at least the day comes, you have a chance of somebody finding you. Well, we prayed, everybody prayed. In the whole group, we prayed as a group. And I think that helped a lot of us. And not only that, I was a good athlete in high school. And I think that helped me a lot also. And between the two things, I think that's one of the things that got me through it. But anyway, about the fourth day, we were kind of all giving up a little hope. And all of a sudden, here comes this plane. And it was Chuck Gwen, our angel. He's looking at his radio antenna, and he's on submarine patrol. And he sees a little slick in the water down there, and so he gets down low to see what's down there. And there we are, all the men waving to him, yelling, waving. And he don't know who we are, whether we're friend or foe. But he says, oh my God, there's a ton of men down there. Then he radios back to his station. And his station sends out another plane, Adrian Marks. And Adrian Marks comes, and he's not supposed to land his plane. And he said, I'm going to land this plane because too many people are being eaten by sharks. He landed his plane, and by God, he saved 57 men. The plane couldn't take off because it was all full of holes, but he did save those men. That was wonderful, and they got the message then to the ships that were not too far away. And they came to find us. And the planes, of course, dropped some rafts and things, but I never did get on one until right near the end. And I went over to try to get onto this raft, and a great big guy, I don't know who he was, said, oh, you can't get onto this raft, we're full. And he pushed me off. Well, when he pushed me off, I lost my jacket. So I just had to hang on to the raft. Well, I said, phooey to that. I said, little by little, I worked my way around to the other side of the raft, and I got on. And I no sooner got on and I just conked out because I hadn't slept very much. And they said there was a light, searchlight that from one of the destroyers, and it was the Doyle who sent the light up into the air so that we knew that these ships were on their way. And little did I know that as soon as that ship pulled alongside, right next to my raft, there was a rope